welcome to the FilmGeeks podcast. I'm Michael DeGregorio from theCharlotteGeeks.com. My co-host Max is in Las Vegas on assignment, so I'll be doing this one by myself. But we're going to do a very special episode, and I know I said that last week, and we seem to say that every week. We're going to do a very special episode. But this week, it's kind of special to me because this week is the 25th anniversary of Batman, the film that came out in 1989 with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, and was directed by Tim Burton, and is basically ground zero for the modern comic book film.
And what do you do for a living?
Lieutenant, is there a 6-foot bat in Gotham City?
Nice outfit. I didn't ask. I have given a name to my pain.
What are you? I'm Batman.
Obviously, Batman existed since 1939, and there was the series in the 1960s with Adam West that everybody remembers growing up with a lot, even in reruns. I grew up with it as well, and but Batman really hadn't been portrayed on screen and in film the way he was portrayed in the comic books until 1989 with Batman that came out June 23rd, 1989. And I remember myself, it was the first film I ever waited in line for. And I don't mean just a little line, I mean like for 5-6 hours. It was a cultural event. Imagine if you took The Dark Knight, the hubbub around The Dark Knight, the hubbub around The Hunger Games, and the hubbub around The Avengers, and put that all together, and you would give an idea of what it felt like in June of 1989. It was absolute bedlam. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen before because it was an event for a film that wasn't a sequel. Nowadays we have anticipation building for movies that are, number 2 or number 3. I mean, we're all looking for the Avengers, Age of Ultron, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, which was the sort of a sequel to the Avengers. But all of these number 2 films, and X-Men 2, X-Men United was a massive thing that everybody was looking forward to, and it was a big hit. There's a lot of films, even The Dark Knight, which came out after Batman Begins in 2005. Batman Begins rebooted the franchise, and in 2008 The Dark Knight became a cultural event. But that was a sequel. In 1989 it was a build-up that really started in around February of 89 when we were looking at the trailers. This was the first movie that ever existed that people bought a ticket to see another film just to see the trailer for Batman. This was the days before the internet, so there wasn't online trailers. You didn't have Coming Soon, you didn't have IMDb, you didn't have these places where you could find the trailers. You could only find it in the theaters, and they were attached to specific films. So there were people buying tickets, and I do not even remember the names of the movies. Like for Star Wars, The Phantom Menace in 1999, they attached the trailer for that to a movie called Wing Commander, which was a very low-budget science fiction movie that was terrible. Just, let's leave it at that. It was horrible. Garbage, absolute garbage. But they attached the trailer for that, for Star Wars, to that movie, and that movie alone. It was a 20th Century Fox release. So people bought tickets to that movie, watched the trailer, and then left. And theaters even put up a thing that said, no refunds, because they knew what people were doing, but they were saying no refunds are given for this film. If you watch the trailer for Batman, you're not getting a refund. People didn't care. They still So there was a lot of movies that year, or there was a couple of movies that winter that came out that made a lot more money than they would have simply based on people buying tickets to see the trailer for Batman. And it was, I'm trying to figure out a way to accurately describe the absolute mayhem and the outrage with the announcement in the fall of '88 that Michael Keaton was being picked to portray Batman. In this day and age, we're used to, Christian Bale wasn't a big action hero. Matt Damon wasn't a big action hero when he did the Bourne movies. So we're kind of more used to that now. But in 1988, in the 80s, there were action heroes. There were, you had your Chuck Norrises, your Steven, we didn't have Steven Seagal yet, but you had Chuck Norris, you had your, Schwarzenegger, there he is. Lord have mercy, I'm blanking without my co-host. Schwarzenegger, you had Sylvester Stallone, you had these guys that's what they did. They did action movies. Michael Keaton was a comedian. He was a comedy actor. He did comedies. He did Beetlejuice, Night Shift. He was Mr. Mom. He was the guy that did comedies. He wasn't known as an action film star. And he certainly wasn't known as a superhero. So when it was announced that he was chosen to play Batman, the outrage was amazing. If you think now that people are upset that Ben Affleck is playing Batman in the new Man of Steel movie, that is nothing. That is nothing. That is nothing but a murmur of complaint compared to when Michael Keaton was cast. They wrote petitions into Warner Brothers, and when I say they, I mean the fans wrote petitions into Warner Brothers. Please reconsider. Do not cast this movie with Batman, or do not put Michael Keaton in this movie. We're not going to watch this movie. Luckily, cooler heads prevailed. Warner Brothers and Tim Burton knew what they had. They knew he could do the part. They knew he had something in his eyes. It's something in the eyes that always sells these guys. When Christian Bale was cast as Batman, Bruce Wayne, in Batman Begins, there wasn't any outrage. There wasn't any murmur, partially because after the fiasco that was Batman and Robin in 1998, that was the death of the franchise that began with this movie we're talking about, there wasn't a lot of interest in Batman, to be honest with you, not in the film world anyway. So when Christian Bale came on board, for me, I was excited because I knew Christian Bale from Equilibrium, which is a fantastic Kurt Wimmer film from 2003, if I'm not mistaken. It's 2002 or 2003. It's a great movie. Well, let me rephrase that. It's not necessarily a great movie by Hollywood standards, by the critical mass, but it is an amazing film just from an action standpoint. And Christian Bale has this thing in his eyes that he looks crazy. It is a controlled anger in that film, Equilibrium, that I knew would be perfect for Batman. I knew when I heard he was cast, I was like, oh, this is actually really good. Because at the time, Christopher Nolan wasn't a known commodity yet. He was sort of, because he had done Memento and he had done Insomnia. Memento was a massive success. It wasn't a commercial success in that it made $100 million, but it was a very popular movie. People loved the film. It was a great film. And then he made Insomnia with Al Pacino and Robin Williams, and that was a very well-made film. I think it was actually a better movie than Memento, but it wasn't quite as successful critically or commercially in that way. So Batman Begins was kind of a gamble. It was kind of a, we don't know what we're getting here. This, we don't know. It could go either way. So when he brought in Christian Bale, it was the first sign. It was like, oh, this is going to really be great. So there was that same aspect for some people when Michael Keaton was cast. He had done Clean and Sober, which was the last movie before Batman. It was in the summer of, the last movie he had made with Tim Burton was Beetlejuice, which came out in the summer of '88. And that was the movie people had in mind when they knew Michael Keaton was going to be Batman. Because there was already a little bit of concern with Tim Burton because he had done Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which was a really good movie. Todd's giving me the thumbs up and the arm, whatever you call this move. Epic. It was a good film, not a comic book movie. Beetlejuice, great movie, not a comic book movie, not a superhero movie. So there was already a little bit of, his visual style was really good, but there was a little question about what he could do. So bringing Michael Keaton into that, who was Beetlejuice, it was like, oh Lord, this is going to be a comedy. They were worried that they were going to make a campy comedy type of a movie that kind of aped the TV show. And that was something that everyone was terrified of. And by I mean everyone, I mean the fans of Batman, the actual people that read the comic book. People like myself, who grew up with Batman on television when I was a little kid, I didn't think about it as being campy. I just came home from school every day and watched it. You know, it was just, I loved the idea he was a superhero. I mean, it was Batman and Robin. And only as I got older did I realize how kind of silly that really was. So when Michael Keaton was cast, there was that outrage that, oh, this is going to be, it's going to be that. It's going to be the campy, ridiculous. So when the first trailer hit for Batman, it's amazing. It's one of those things where everyone was just silenced immediately. The same thing happened in February or January of 2008 when the first trailer for The Dark Knight came out and you first seen Heath Ledger as the Joker. You didn't actually see him, you heard him. And just the images and the images online of him in character and then the trailer with just his voice silenced the critics for Heath Ledger. And it was the same thing happened with Michael Keaton. It was just, wow, this is unbelievable. This guy, he is really, really good. He's got the feel, he's got the voice, he's got the eyes, behind the cape, behind the cowl, it's the eyes. And before that, people started getting excited even before the trailer came out when it was announced Jack Nicholson was going to play the Joker. It's one of those things where some people seem to be born to play a role. Jack Nicholson, for most people in 1988, 1989, he was born to play the Joker. He was, after he was announced as Batman, people like myself went back and watched The Witches of Eastwick, which came out in 1988. It was Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer, Cher, and Susan Sarandon. And basically, it was about a group of witches, and Jack Nicholson played the devil. I don't think they actually called him that, but that's who he was. I mean, you know, it was inferred he was the devil himself. And he was amazing in that movie. And that was the last movie he made before Batman. So it was like, okay, this could be really great. The trailer hit, and it was like, oh my God, it started. All of a sudden, you started seeing the bat signal, or not the bat signal, but the bat emblem everywhere. It was on T-shirts. It was on sides of buildings. It was spray painted. It was on lunchboxes. It was on T-shirts everywhere, of every kind. Kids T-shirts, adult T-shirts. That's more common now. You see that a lot now, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is now then. It was just everywhere. So the building started. The anticipation started. You started seeing more and more stills, more and more pieces of stuff from behind the scenes. And remember, again, this is 1989. There isn't the internet. There isn't the kind of saturation where you can just go online and click 1,000 different websites and see different things, different behind-the-scenes footage, people filming while they're shooting on the set. This movie was shot in England. It was shot on closed sets. Nobody saw anything. There was no spies from the set selling footage to TMZ. There was none of that. It was a vacuum. So you didn't see anything until the movie was done, and you started seeing official press releases, official trailers, official kits, official, television spots and stuff. So the anticipation started building. And I mean, it grew to the point that by June of that year, it was at a fever pitch. I mean, it was like a rock concert. It was a rock concert that was happening nationwide at the same time. And it was like the Beatles were playing everywhere at one time. And you were hoping you could get a ticket to see them. And it was funny because everybody wanted to see it first. Everybody wanted to be, and I was the same way. Everybody wanted to see it opening night, or at least the Saturday. Nobody wanted to wait. I mean, you realize objectively the movie's coming out. It's going to be out. We're going to be able to see it. We don't have to wait in this line for 5-6 hours, but we did. We did it anyway. And this movie was huge. It was 2 hours and 4 minutes of just visual overload. And it was just, at the time, it lived up to everything I wanted. And bear in mind, I didn't even know what I wanted. Not really. I was a Batman fan, but I wasn't a fanatic. I didn't know the lore. I didn't know the backstory. I didn't read the comic books. I've said it 1,000 times that I never read comic books. I watch comic book movies, but I'm not a comic book reader. So I didn't know all the story, but for me, it hit all of the things that I wanted to see. Yes, Batman is a little stiff. He can't move a lot because the suit weighed 80 pounds. Sure, he couldn't turn his head. Fine. You see that now, and you realize now, yeah, it was a little clunky. There wasn't an origin for Batman, which is strange because now every movie in the world with a superhero has to have an origin story. Batman in '89, he was already Batman. It was just a done deal. He was already there. He was already on the scene. We got a Joker origin, but even that was kind of truncated. It was quick. It was told fast and then got right into it. So it was just, and yes, Vicky Vale, Alfred let her into the Batcave. Big mistake. Alfred didn't let everybody in the Batcave, but that's another story. It was a little clunky in places. It was, objectively, looking back, it was not the strongest script in the world. However, it hit all of the pleasure zones in a teenage boy that we wanted to see. And it was just amazing. And the film reached $100 million in the first 10 days. I think it was one of the first films to do that. And it set the standard for the modern blockbuster, number one, and for the modern comic book film, number two. Now, yes, did Superman had existed before that. Superman stands alone. It's on its own thing. There had never been a movie like it. There still hasn't been a movie like Superman the movie. So that the modern film that you think of when you think of the Avengers, The Dark Knight, Captain America, those movies, Batman was the ground zero for those films. That was the birth of it. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue on with Batman Talk. As always, we want to give a great shout out to Scott Clark Toyota for letting us shoot here at their lovely facilities. And if you need a new or used vehicle, come on down to Scott Clark Toyota because they have over 1,000 vehicles in stock. They have lifetime warranties on all new vehicles and selected pre-owned vehicles. So come on down to 13,000 East Independence Boulevard in Matthews. Find them online at scottclarktoyota.com or call 704-535-1972. Call Scott Clark Toyota today. So the summer of 1989 belonged to Batman. I mean, it was just everywhere. As I've said, you couldn't read a book, you couldn't read a magazine, you couldn't walk through a mall, you couldn't go anywhere in public and not see a bat symbol on everything. It was just prevalent, and that was the first time that something like that had hit with a movie that fast. Now I know you're sitting at home thinking, well, I grew up with Star Wars and Star Wars lunch boxes and Star Wars sheets on my bed and all that. Yes, you did. However, those things came considerably after the film. And they coincided with Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, yes. But Star Wars was a movie unto its own, and all the merchandising came later. With Batman, it hit at the same time. Actually, some of the merchandising hit even before the movie opened. And it was like a fully born phenomenon all at one time. And that was, I keep alluding to the birth of the modern blockbuster, the birth of the modern comic book film. That's what I mean when I say that, because it was the first time that had happened. It had all came out at one time. It was, it was just an inundation of everything all at once. On television, at the movie, obviously with the film, at comic book stores, magazines, novelizations. I read the novelization of the film like 2 months before I saw the movie, before it came out. And it was just everywhere. I can't stress that enough. And it had never been that way before. And now we're used to that. Now it's business as usual. At the time, it had never existed before. Not to that level, not that fast. However, the summer of 1989 also contained a few more films that have become classics. You had Ghostbusters 2, Ghostbusters 2, which I don't know if it's a classic. It is definitely, it reminds people of a classic that came out 5 years before that. You had Ghostbusters 2, you had Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which was up until the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which we won't talk too much about, ever. It was the last Indiana Jones movie. And it had Sean Connery as his father. And it was, it was a great movie. It had been 5 years since we had seen Indy on the screen, and it was just great to see him in a great adventure that was more reminiscent of Raiders of the Lost Ark, the original film, than the first sequel, The Temple of Doom, had been. So you had Ghostbusters 2, you had Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and you had Batman, which was, I think I've sold that enough. It was huge. It was a magnificent event. The summer of '89 was a good year for film. Batman owned the film, and everything else has been kind of pushed away. Lethal Weapon 2 came out that year, which was also a magnificent film. It's funny because I'm going through this list in my head right now, and it's like Batman was the only original film that really hit big, that I can remember anyway, that at least that was in the geek culture, was in the genre culture. There was, I think, like the Dead Poet Society came out that year, but these movies were, that movie was more of an adult skewing film, and all the other films that were kind of aimed at the teenage guy, the geek audience, which is what this podcast kind of caters to. Batman was the only film that was an original product, a first film in a series. Everything else was a sequel. Now, if you go back 30 years to the summer of 1984, then you have the original Ghostbusters, which was a certified classic. If you have not seen that movie, pause this podcast and go watch it right now, and then come back and watch the rest of the podcast, because I don't think you can fully appreciate everything we're talking about if you haven't seen Ghostbusters. That movie was a landmark in its own right. Summer of '84, there have, in geek circles, there are several different ongoing arguments, several different ongoing discussions they're lighthearted and they're kind of back and forth. One of them is the summer of '84 versus summer of '82. Summer of '82, you had The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. You had E.T., obviously. You had Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. It was a fantastic year for geek movies. Summer of '84, you had a lot of great movies as well. You had, as I've said, you had Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which was really dark. That was the film, as a side note, the film that brought in the PG-13 rating. The movies that you see now, almost 80% of the films that you see in the theater now are rated PG-13. They all are traced back to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, because it was so dark and so violent, and so the last half of that movie was so relentlessly horrifying to children. You had Indiana Jones under the spell of the evil cult wizard, and you had his heart being almost taken out. You did have somebody else's heart being taken out. It was, you had the Kali death cult. I mean, it was just a lot of really brutal images. And that was the movie that sent parents over the edge. They were like, they were complaining basically to the theaters. And Hollywood put out for the first time since they had since they had established the rating system to start with, they put out a new rating, which was PG-13. And it wasn't the first movie that was rated PG-13. It was the movie that brought about the rating. Like, it was the film that touched off that conversation that ended in the rating. You had Ghostbusters, you had Beverly Hills Cop, not a summer movie, but it came out in Christmas of 1984, and I'm going to talk about that movie just a little bit here, because on the website, on the FilmGeeks website, we're going to do an in-depth look at Beverly Hills Cop. A great movie, I think probably the pinnacle of Eddie Murphy's career. It was absolutely, in my mind, the whole movie's flashing in front of my mind, and I'm trying to figure out one or two scenes I can just tell you. There's so many classic moments in that movie. Eddie Murphy is improvising a lot in that movie, and if you know a little bit about the story, I will go into a great deal of the story on the website. However, briefly touch on it. That movie was originally written for Sylvester Stallone. It was supposed to be a Stallone movie. Then it was written as just a straight up action movie. It was written as like a crime thriller. It changed slowly by little. Some of those elements still remain, but when they brought Eddie Murphy in, basically he went by the script only somewhat. Everybody else went by the script. Eddie Murphy kind of just made it up as he went along. A lot of the great classic scenes, the classic bits that you remember in that movie were improvisation. Did you know that, Todd?
I did not know.
All right. I have informed my producer and director of something he did not know. Yeah, so that is you look at that movie now from a film fan standpoint, as someone who loves the writing and the production of films, and you see perfectly the three-act structure. You see the beginning, the middle, the setup, all the resolution. You see the setup and payoffs of so many different parts, so many different, just classic scenes. Just, like I said, the best Eddie Murphy film he's ever done has been Beverly Hills Cop. If you, in the viewing audience, only know Eddie Murphy from Norbert and Daddy Daycare and any one of 100 crappy movies that have come out in the last decade, and you're like, I don't get the big deal about Eddie Murphy. Why was he so popular? Go watch Beverly Hills Cop, and that will be the one-stop lesson about why Eddie Murphy was considered one of the great comedy actors of all time. And he still remains, he holds that title, and it's all largely responsible to Beverly Hills Cop. Yes, Trading Places was great. 48 Hours was great. Those were all setups. Those were all pre-shows. Those were all opening events to the main event, which was Beverly Hills Cop. Beverly Hills Cop was one of the great movies that came out in 1984. And on the website in the next week or so, look for it. It's going to be an in-depth discussion of Beverly Hills Cop. However, going back to the summer of '84, Ghostbusters, another great movie that was written for somebody else. That movie was written for John Belushi. Think about that. What would that movie have looked like with John Belushi in the Bill Murray part? I can't even imagine it. But then again, Indiana Jones was written for, do you know, Todd?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Close, but, well, not really close. It was written originally for, well, I don't know if it was written, but the original guy attached to that movie was Tom Selleck.
Oh, God, that would have been awful.
Imagine Tom Selleck as Indiana Jones. Yeah, you can't really, because that doesn't make any sense.
Indiana Jones in a Ferrari.
Well, just look at some of the Jesse Stone movies. They're on Netflix right now, which is like his, he made for CBS, I think, series of movies. And then picture that as Indiana Jones. But anyway, going back to the summer of '84, it was a great geek film summer. It was, I don't know, in my opinion, I guess '82 may have the edge because Blade Runner came out in 1982, and Blade Runner was another seismic earthquake in the world of film, not just geek film, in film, period. Ridley Scott is a genius. I said it, he's a genius. And Blade Runner, I think Blade Runner and John Carpenter's The Thing give 82 the edge. And I'm not even getting into The Wrath of Khan and E.T., which, you know, come on, even Tron. Tron came out in 1982. Came out and didn't make any money, but it was still a good movie. 84 also had, the summer of 84 had The Last Starfighter. That was a good movie. It had The Karate Kid. That was a good movie. These movies just come to me now, and I watch those movies all the time. And yes, if you only know The Karate Kid from the remake with Will Smith and, not Will Smith, his son rather, and Jackie Chan, in which no karate is actually used. Kung Fu. If that's the only way you know that movie, do yourself a favor. You can get the Karate Kid special edition DVD for like $7 at Walmart. Watch it. Buy that movie and watch it. That is a really great movie. John G. Avildsen directed it. He's the guy who directed Rocky, the movie that made Sylvester Stallone. He's a great underdog director. He does great underdog stories, and The Karate Kid is a great movie. Also, Gizmo. Which movie was Gizmo in?
Gremlins.
Gremlins, there you go. A movie that throws people off because it's set at Christmas time. But yet it came out in the summer of 1984. I'm not really sure about that, to be honest with you. I'm not sure why they did that. They've done that on a number of films. The original Lethal Weapon in 1987 came out. Great movie, classic film. We'll talk about that series one day. In March, but that movie came out in March of 1987, and it was set. The whole movie set at Christmas time. It's set around Christmas time. The opening scene in the movie is the credit sequence of the movie has Jingle Bell Rock. That's the opening theme of the movie. So they do that a few times. So Gremlin throws people off sometimes. They think it came out it's a Christmas movie. They figure it came out at Christmas time. It came out in the summertime. So I don't know. Summer of 84 might be pulling ahead of 82. I don't know. We'll have to think about that some more. But anyway, getting back to the original discussion of Batman, and I'm going to wrap this up, I promise. I'm going to let you get back to your life. Batman in 89, summer of 89, was the start of the comic book film, the kind of comic book movies that we know now. Yes, there have been some blunders. There have been some cheesy films here and there. Yes, that has happened. I will fully admit that. In fact, Batman Returns, which came out in 1992, the sequel to this movie with Danny DeVito as possibly the grossest character I've ever seen on screen with the Penguin, the only villain in a movie that's ever made me nauseous, and Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, great. That was a lot darker. Now, if you want to see what a movie looks like when a director has complete and total control, watch Batman Returns, because he was still, Tim Burton I'm talking about, was on a leash somewhat with Batman. I mean, he had some things he had to do. He had boxes he had to check, so to speak, for the company. And so you got a film that was balanced. It was dark in some respects, but it also had a lot of light elements and a lot of classic Hollywood elements. When you get to Batman Returns, I'm sorry, Batman Returns in 92, you have more of just a really weird movie, and that's more of Tim Burton's Unchained film. Then he left the series, and it went to Joel Schumacher, who made Batman Forever with Val Kilmer and Jim Carrey. Yeah, I like Jim Carrey. I love Tommy Lee Jones. They were horribly miscast in that film. Val Kilmer was okay as Batman. It was kind of jarring for people after Michael Keaton. He had made 2 back-to-back, and you'd gotten kind of used to him. And then, Val Kilmer comes in, and it's a lot more comic booky, and I don't mean that in a good way. I mean that in a bad way. It was a lot more kind of corny, and then they stepped it up and just became blasphemous with Batman and Robin, again with Arnold Schwarzenegger returning to the conversation. Last thing, in 1984, The Terminator.
I'll be back.
I'll be back, and he was back. 1998, he came back as Mr. Freeze and ruined Batman.
You shouldn't have come back.
Yes, so after that, the Batman franchise went off the rails. So yes, there have been bad comic book movies. I will fully admit to that. But I still maintain that the beginning of the comic book movie that you know now, the superhero you know now, was Batman in '89. And this is the 25th anniversary. If you haven't seen it, if you only know Batman from The Dark Knight, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises, do yourself a favor. It's not a film that holds up especially well, not to me anyway, and not after you've seen the modern films, the modern take on it. You've seen The Tumbler, and you've seen the Joker going head-to-head with Batman in The Dark Knight, which is a masterpiece film, one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. Yes, it's going to be a little corny compared to that. But given what came before, the last superhero movie before Batman was Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, which might be the worst superhero movie ever made. Then you jump 2 years to Batman, and that is the beginning of the modern blockbuster, the modern superhero movie. Okay? That's a little bit of homework for you film geeks out there. So we're going to come back next week. My good friend and co-host David Mackey will be back from assignment and from Las Vegas, hopefully with some great stories and pictures that we can't share on air.
Where'd he go?
We love you, Max. Come on back to us, man, please. But stay in touch with us. You can find us online. You can find us on Twitter at FilmGeeks384. You can find us on Facebook, FilmGeeks384. You can find us on the web. The website, I keep pointing below, and this website keeps not being there, but trust us, you can find us. It's there? It is there? Okay. Trust me, it's there. Find us online and tell us what you think. Tell us what you want to hear us talk about. What you like about the show, what you don't like about the show. If you like me talking continuously nonstop for 40 minutes, or if you like somebody else talking with me. Personally, myself, I need somebody else here to kind of temper this a little bit. But stay in touch with us. We want this to be interactive. Come to the website. Shayla's got arguments. Shayla's got arguments. Shayla's got articles up. Cameron Moore's got arguments up. Or articles up. I'll get it right. So come visit us online, and outside of that, stay with us. We'll see you next time.